Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
You got Luke?
Luke, we have two special guests with us again today. Probably the least interesting of the people we've been interviewing here.
You
but
think?
they're also people that can fire us. So
When it's your boss's boss's boss and then other bosses, it's a little
it's
scary
it's
sometimes.
scary, right?
Yep.
So with us we have Greg Fallon, VP of Design and Manufacturing for the Business Strategy and Marketing teams. That is a lot of words. A lot of words. And then we also have Steve Hooper, VP and GM of the Fusion family of products. Welcome, guys. Could you, before we get started with everything, give us a quick idea of what it is you do?
You go first, Steve.
Okay, all right, I'll start. So what we're trying to do is build a full integrated stack of tools for customers that build products, right? So everything from coming up with the initial ideation and concept definition all the way through to manufacturing it, whether it involves electronics, mechanical engineering, if they have to do some simulation along the way, we want to be able to give them a platform on which they can do that whole process. If we put it on one platform like that, we can help them explore new tech like the generative design capabilities that we're bringing to market. So that's pretty much what I do. I look after that, run the development team that's building that, and then work very closely with Greg on taking it to market and helping customers understand what we're trying to do for them, as well as listening to more about what they need and how we can better solve their problems.
All right.
Okay.
Greg, how about you?
As Steve mentioned, we work really closely together. So my job is really to think about go-to-market strategy and then the market space in general and helping the market reimagine manufacturing. Right, so we have a very specific point of view on what we think reimagining manufacturing looks like, specifically automating the design and make process. So my team thinks about how we want to bring our products to market, where the opportunities are, looking outside of our existing customer base to see what else is out there that we want to be doing.
And also apparently see who can have the longest title. Is that like the?
That's part
It's a
of it.
competition. If it doesn't scroll onto another line, then you've lost.
I think I can go 3 lines.
Okay, so and Steve, you've done this before, so no cheating. We always want to get to know you a little better, and this is like, would we be friends?
I think at
outside
AU
of-
we decided that we would in fact be friends.
Yeah.
So that would be nice.
So we have a couple icebreaker questions just to loosen you guys up. So, and you're going to answer these just one then the next. So, favorite engineer, designer, or scientist, living or dead? Greg.
Oh man, that's not really fair.
Well, okay. Do you have one, Steve?
I'm racking my brains now. There's so many. I don't want to go with the obvious.
We already had an obvious Elon Musk.
Oh really?
yeah.
Yeah.
Not that he's doing cool stuff, but no,
Not good enough.
not good enough. No, I'll have to think more.
Okay, we'll come
All right,
back
so,
to that.
I mean, I'm going to be, it's not really related to our business. I mean, my favorite scientist is probably this woman from Harvard, Lisa Rendell, who wrote a book about dark matter.
Okay.
And that's kind of interesting. But
That's a great one. That's perfect.
If we're going down that route,
Sure.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't have to be
Why
related
not?
to
I'm gonna have to
anything
go
we do.
Hawking just to fly the British
There
flag.
we go.
That's
Oh,
perfect.
that-
Yeah, this was not related to anything we do.
Represent.
Next one. How much do you think it costs to change the oil in a $1.7 million Bugatti Veyron? It was just on MSN this morning. If you do any kind of MSN browsing, this is really current.
£2,620.
So that's like
$4.
$3,000. Well, yeah, after brakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Greg.
I would go upwards of 30,000.
You are way closer. It is
Really?
$20,000 to $25,000 to change the oil in a Bugatti Veyron.
That's so
There's an
stupid.
article a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't MSN. It was another news network. I can't remember where I saw
Wow.
it. Yeah.
That's craziness. I thought it might be your Bugatti that you get changed
I was going
all
to say,
the
you can
time.
tell
I don't
which
know.
one of us
Yeah.
is closer to owning a Bugatti than...
In your mind, is Pluto a planet?
As defined, the new definition is it's got to be spherical, so yes.
Okay.
I'd say yes.
Okay. The reason, so I was brought up, learning Pluto was a planet, and then Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's my arch nemesis,
Yeah.
had this whole
Doesn't know
campaign to get rid of Pluto as a planet. So, and we just did a podcast on him, so that's
Right.
why we're
That's
why we're
fake
on there.
science.
That's right, fake science. Last one. Do either of you know what big birthday it is today?
Oh,
No idea.
It's happy 19th birthday to Autodesk Inventor.
19 years ago today.
Yeah. I
did not
just
know.
found out about that as well. So
Yeah,
Interesting.
we didn't know. One of the product managers emailed us.
yeah. All right. So moving on to some actual questions here. We've heard a whole bunch of talk about future of making throughout the past couple of days, and I mean forever now. But specifically here, let's talk a little bit, without as much Autodesk talk as possible, about what future of making means to your everyday designer.
Oh, I'll jump in.
Whoever wants
We
to.
were just talking to Steve Gottsinger, who works for Steelcase, and he just in a Q&A session, he had the best answer I thought that I'd heard in a while. We were talking about a new chair, I think it's called the Silk with a Q, that they've just brought to market, and it's got like a one-piece back to it that's sprung. And I asked him, how they'd come up with the idea, and he'd said that it wasn't the designer working on the project that had come up with the idea on their own. They'd been down on the shop talking to the tooling guy who had some experience with composites materials that they'd been working with in the prosthetics industry, and it was through that exchange that they'd come up with this idea for a one-piece back that flexed with the chair. And so there's no technology involved, it's just bringing the worlds of manufacturing and design together, and a better appreciation of the material, the manufacturing process, informing the design and ideation phase up front, derived a more innovative product. And I thought that was just a really nice example without the need to talk about CAD or CAM software or anything like that. Just simple two human beings working together on sharing knowledge and coming up with a new idea. I thought that was great.
Okay.
To me, that's the kind of future of making, is not treating the definition and design of a product separately from its manufacturer. It's all one thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so if you blow that up a little bit to think about what a designer does today and what they might do in the future, a designer's world is really defined by the software they work in, right? Lines and fillets and rounds. And that career has been defined for the last 30 or 40 years that way, but that's not how designers are trained. Mm-hmm. Designers are trained to think about physics, to think about how things function, and I think the future of making is actually going back in time to how people are trained, to think about form and function and the physics behind them. And so thinking about things like materials and manufacturing processes. So what I get excited about is that we all get to be engineers we were trained to be, not the engineers that we're kind of constrained to be by the tools we're using.
I like that we've gone from black holes and astrophysics, and now we're going back in time. It just feels like it's all fitting together nicely.
Okay, so when we think about the future of making, there's a lot of fusion that we've been talking about. And when we think of Fusion 360 and the Fusion family, how do products like the Product Design Manufacturing Collection and Inventor, we talked about its 19th birthday, how does that fit into the future of making in your minds?
Well, I feel like they're connected. So we've worked pretty hard to make sure there's workflows between those tools. And Greg and I have been working on including Fusion as part of the collection. And then we collapsed the Fusion tiers. And the reason we did that was mainly to make sure that people had access to generative. So generative, the generative technology that's in Fusion was in the ultimate tier of the product. And so when we collapsed those to one single offering, that's the offering that's now in the collection. That means any collection customer has access to be able to use generative design. And they also have a workflow. So there's an associative link between Inventor and Fusion using AnyCAD. So it means that they now have access to those tools and technologies as part of the collection. So I think, the whole thing kind of comes together in that collection and is the future of making for our customers, because it provides them with all the tools they need based on the technology they're working with today, as well as new tools and technologies that we're introducing with Fusion.
Okay. So you kind of stole my thunder on a later question. You talked about the restack that happened with Fusion. There was a big announcement. I saw your video, I think it was last week, 2 weeks ago. Could you go in a little more detail on what's happening with that change?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that, firstly, that it was as simple as possible for people to understand how to acquire the technology. So we didn't want to have multiple tiers, just one access point for people. So in collapsing the tiers together, it basically means that everyone's got access to everything that was in both products. So things like 5-axis machining, which is traditionally really expensive. I mean, many vendors would charge upwards of $45,000. That's included as part of the Fusion offering at $495 now. Same thing with things like generative design. which is a little different because it's pay-as-you-go based consumption. Same with our non-linear NAS transolvers. Again, all of those are in that single offering, so everyone's got access to it. And to make sure that existing subscribers were happy, we have maintained the renewal prices for those existing subscribers, so they don't see any difference in price from what they originally signed up for. And it just means that everyone gets access to the same pool of technology, and it means that everyone is able to enjoy, some of those tools that really represent the future of making well, like generative design, where you start to see all of our technologies combined together.
So that means someone with the collection is getting that restacked Fusion, so they'll have access to generative.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
if you think about it, when it was Fusion Ultimate, only Fusion Ultimate had generative, and we didn't include Fusion Ultimate in the collection. So it meant as a collection customer, you had Fusion, but you didn't have the generative design, 5-axis machining, and nonlinear simulation tech that was in the Ultimate version, because that was outside of the collection.
Gotcha.
So when we collapsed it to just one single Fusion, that's now the one that's in the collection. You've got access to everything.
That's great.
So we talk a lot about generative design, like a lot. All the talk about generative. And Greg, this was pretty much your baby for a long time, I suppose. Could you tell us, is it ready for the big time? Are people ready to start using it, or is it kind of a work in progress and it's getting there, learning together?
Yeah, sure. So, I think for generative to really take hold, right, we really need the customers to be changing their processes. The market is kind of aligning around this idea that automating, in this case, geometry creation is a good thing. And then the technology is maturing. So I think we're at our early phases of generative. I think generative is just starting out. I think we've learned some really surprising things about the technology and the value proposition over the last year that were very unexpected. I think originally when we started the project, we weren't sure what value people were going to find out of it. We didn't know if it was going to be about lightweighting or if it was going to be about part consolidation or something else. But actually what we found was that it's about something much bigger than either of those. It's really about compressing the innovation cycles and then also helping people to think at a much higher level. So the GM example is a fantastic one where we worked with them. They created this seatbelt bracket that was, I think, an assembly made out of 8 parts, compressed into a single part that took on a geometry or shape that they had never imagined before. And the great part about that story is that the original seatbelt bracket that was designed took 3 months to go from ideation to a validated design. The process of the reimagined bracket was created by a team in 8 hours. So they went from design requirements to 150 valid design options within 8 hours.
That's amazing.
So you mentioned GM. Follow up to that. So we've seen the Lightning motorcycle example as well, and those appear to be on kind of 2 different ends of a spectrum. So GM, multi-billion-dollar automotive company. Lightning Motorcycles, kind of a startup electric motorcycle corporation, and that's where we're seeing this right now. How does this, everyday engineer, if you were in an elevator with a guy working with just average person at a small to medium sized company, what would be their first step to get involved with generative?
So I would say the one thing, regardless of size, that those 2 companies have got in common is that they're prepared to look at manufacturing processes like additive or investment casting and other technologies in the manufacturing space that support those more organic forms and shapes. So the thing that we're working on next is how to open up the opportunity to use generative with more traditional manufacturing processes by imposing constraints on the solver that look at things like 2.5-axis machining. We'll be introducing 3-axis and 5-axis shortly, and we'll continue to open that up. So Greg's team had already been looking at different manufacturing processes that are used in the mainstream, and I think when we do that, when we look at things like generative structures, or if we can start to look at things like 2.5-axis machining, sheet metal, injection molding, those types of techniques will mean that the application of generative will become broader than what you see today. What you see today are the kind of early adopters because they're in a position where they can use those alternate forms of manufacturing process that a lot of our customers can't yet. But we know that, so for your average inventor customer who maybe is working in a fabrication shop, we're thinking about applications for generative that are relevant in that space as well. So it's not just going to be for autos, aeros, and high-end sort of rocket manufacturers. We're going to bring that to the mainstream pretty quickly.
That's great.
One of our breakout sessions here had one of the early adopters talking about how he's using generative design, and the amount of questions at the Q&A part about it really showed how interested everybody is in the technology, even if they're not adopting it yet. But you can see that they're trying to figure out how it's going to be part of their workflow.
Yeah, one other thing I would add to that, there was a guy here called Thomas Nagel. He works for a company called Claudius Peters. They don't use additive manufacturing processes, but what they do is they take the generative output and then they use it as a guide for conventional manufacturing processes. So they'll then take that as a guide and figure out how to do it using, fabrication techniques as an example. So it can be still a really valuable tool to help people innovate. And I think that's where Greg touched on earlier. Initially, people were looking at it for things like lightweighting or part consolidation. One of the unexpected outcomes is because it's divergent exploration. So instead of taking a part and just trying to rip as much material out as you can to optimize it for weight, it actually provides you with hundreds, if not thousands, of alternatives. Sometimes it can come up with ideas that you've never thought about. So it stimulates innovation, and that's one hot topic for generative, I think, that people are really embracing.
So Greg, this one's for you. So with all this talk of generative and Fusion family and all the different things, how do we make sure that our inventor and our product design and manufacturing customers understand that that is still a priority for us? We have lots of customers obviously using the collection and inventor with Fusion 360. So how do we make sure that they know that that's still important for us to continue to deliver the innovation in those areas as well?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and it's one that Steve and I have been talking about, and I've been talking about a lot with the rest of the company. I think that it's a really important point to make. I mean, obviously, Inventor's not going away, and we have hundreds of thousands of users of Inventor in the marketplace using a fantastic tool. We then have PDMC, which delivers unbelievable value for the price, where we're giving engineers access to literally tens of thousands of dollars of software for a fraction of that. And so we have a big job in just getting that message out. And so you'll see a lot of emphasis on this at AU. You'll see emphasis over the next 12 months, reminding everybody that we're kind of going back to basics. So we've got this fantastic vision for the future. And what we can now do is let every engineer in the world, regardless of what you do, take the next step on that journey. And so that's going to be a major campaign theme, or a major theme that you'll see coming from the D&M group overall over the next year. And I think we as employees of Autodesk need to remind ourselves that we're not just talking about the future of making things. It's not just for cool people in skinny jeans or whatever is cool these days. I'm the opposite. But the future of making things affects every single one of us. If you can think, and if you can remember any of your basic engineering education, you can participate in the future of making things.
So one last question before we wrap this up. You guys are kind of old, like Luke. This happens. How is
he's
not according to Neil Cross?
Well, not
I had
according
an
to Neil.
incredibly young hairline. So.
we actually just got an email from Neil saying that he loves you yesterday.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to tell you that he loves you,
but now it's out there.
I feel the same, Neil. I feel.
So at your advanced ages, Luke, I mean you too.
Yeah, that's
technology is kind of scary. New technology is kind of weird. How do you guys at Autodesk, help guide us to be sure that we're still on the cutting edge of all the tech trends?
That's easy. Work with customers.
Work with customers?
Yeah, love working with customers. Honestly, this event that we're at right now is just filled with customers, and we get the chance to sit side by side with them. I told them this morning, the best thing they can do for us, and I'd say the same for anyone that's listening to this, is tell us what we're not doing well. Tell us where we could improve. We'll gain a lot more value from that, and we'll be able to better serve you as a vendor. We're working on all sorts of ways to do that, so it doesn't need to just be through forums. We have manufacturing facilities, so we work side by side with customers to actually bring products to life. You mentioned Claudius Peters is a good example, and Lightning Motorcycles have worked with us. There are many customers we work with to not just look at the software application, but to also physically bring their product to life. It teaches us a lot more about their process. that's the best way for us to help, evolve technology, is hand in hand with the people that use it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add to that is absolutely. I think that, if there's one thing that every company needs to do is spend time with their customers. There's another side of the coin that we take for granted at Autodesk, which is looking outside of technology. I mean, Autodesk is very much a Silicon Valley company, a company that's rooted in innovation. We invest in innovation in all sorts of different ways. And looking out to see what the technology trends is also super hard, right? So we heard Steelcase talk earlier today about how he goes to bed every night having read kind of the latest tech trends. He talked about 5G cellular networks. He talked about artificial intelligence. And so the nice thing about that is that you can store the information in the back of your mind, and then when you start to look at customer problems, you can start to put two and two together and imagine what things could look like.
Yep.
I think it's interesting because most people, even internally, we kind of think, oh, you guys probably just sit behind your desks, you're in meetings all the time, but you're actually out there talking to customers, you're at events like this, meeting them, empathizing, as Steelcase Steve was saying, and learning about the problems and how to make our products better.
We can use the tools as well, right? So we have facilities like the Pier where we have machining centers, and we can physically go and use the software we build and actually make stuff ourselves. Many of us are ex-engineers, so we get a kick out of doing it.
Ex-engineers.
I'm professional engineers.
Yes.
But we get a kick out of it, and we do it for the reason that we love manufacturing and design. It's not that we're all just business folks. We love what we do because we're one of the customer base at heart anyway.
Great. Well, I think we better call it on that.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully everyone else liked it as well. Maybe they weren't as disinteresting as I led people to believe. But I guess until next time.
And enjoy the rest of your Accelerate, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye now.